Good afternoon to you. It is now 4:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up at 5:30, Jonathan Bronitsky will be with us. He's got a brand new column out. Jewish Democrats, wake up. We'll chat with him about that. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Department of Homeland Security, if you can even call it that, has a secretary called Alejandro Mayorkas. He's been impeached by the United States House of Representatives, and he was asked by even NBC, why won't he take executive action to secure the border? Listen.
Why not take executive action right now? Why not do more right now to address this?
What executive action are you suggesting that we take that we haven't taken that would survive court scrutiny?
What could we possibly do? It's just a big old mystery. For more on this, let's bring in Congressman Chip Roy. He represents Texas, a border state, in their 21st Congressional District. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Great to be on, Vince. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. When Secretary Mayorkas says he doesn't know what executive actions he could take, is he lying?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, and it won't be the last. He lied to me under oath when he declared to the world that they were doing everything they could to have operational control of the border, that they, in fact, had operational control of the border. Then he tried to play games with the definition and went and said something different in another committee. All of this has been done on purpose to try to obfuscate the truth, that they have no intention on enforcing the law. Now, I will say it is nevertheless important that we need to actually change the laws to both force an administration like this one to follow the law, but also to supplement and support whatever we will hopefully be able to achieve under President Trump if he is elected in November, and work hard to do that. You got to change the laws because there's been bad decisions by courts.
Yeah. There's
been abuses of the law. So we need to do that. But he is dead wrong and lying when he says they can't take action right now to stop the abuse of parole and asylum, releasing people into the United States on purpose, including Chinese foreign nationals, 24,000 since October 1 that have been apprehended, and releasing people from all over the world and endangering Americans, including the parolee that killed Laken Riley and other parolees that have killed Americans, raped, murdered, robbed, and undermined the security of the American people.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the first 100 days of the Biden administration, he imposed 100 executive orders designed to weaken our immigration system and to allow all of this to happen. That includes ICE arrests dropping by more than 60% during just the first 100 days of his presidency. They got rid of travel bans from all sorts of countries that were on our terror watch lists. And they expanded the types of people who are eligible for so-called humanitarian protections and people who are getting immigration benefits. There are clearly executive actions here, a long chain of them. NBC might not be familiar with them, but a long chain of them that they could impose right now that would help to make this situation a lot better.
Yeah, no question. They're doing it on purpose, and they're dumping people into the United States, and they've found every mechanism by which they can do it under the abuse of our legal system. So everybody understands that the law as it is written requires us to control the border and not let people in without either papers or a legitimate claim to asylum, which is based upon having a legitimate fear of persecution for your religious or political beliefs. We're not doing that. We're using these exceptions in the code to dump people in the United States intentionally. Now, I think it's really important, though, to note this is all still happening with funding from Republicans. Republicans have voted to continue to fund this stuff without making him stop it. So when the founders gave us the power of the purse, we're supposed to use it when you have a president violating the law. We have refused to do that. So we're funding an out-of-control DHS, a DHS secretary that ignores the law willfully, and a president who doesn't care.
Right. So this is one of the areas where sometimes I hear some apologists for why the Congress hasn't passed meaningful border legislation. They say, well, it doesn't matter because Biden wouldn't follow the law anyway, even if new laws were imposed on his administration. But that said, what you just laid out is a perfect example of an area where they couldn't squirm out of it, Congressman Chip Roy. Because if you defund, say, the NGOs that are being used to traffic human beings into our country, they're out of luck. They don't have money flowing to them. But Republicans keep making that happen, don't they?
Yeah, that's certainly correct. We're facilitating the trade. We are funding the United Nations that is moving people up through the Darien Gap and through Mexico, producing paperwork and all the instructions and funding the NGOs that are then funneling people into the United States. We're doing that. And by the way, in this funding bill this weekend, we funded more NGOs that are both going to be moving refugees around the world, some of whom will end up in the United States in violation of all that we hold dear in terms of moving people in the United States, but also funding the NGOs that are undermining Israel and the IDF and will give money to Hamas. I know that's a different issue, but it's all related. We keep writing the check. We keep funding the entities that are against us, and we're not requiring the administration to follow the law and adhere to change.
Okay, so let me turn my attention now to the guy who's in charge in the House, Speaker Mike Johnson, and your thoughts on what he's up to, because he's been making the claim that he's just been dealt a really tough hand. The margins are too small. He can't achieve the things that the base wants him to achieve, like securing the border. But I hear him say stuff like that, and I look specifically at his decision to be the tie-breaking vote to extend warrantless surveillance of American citizens. He didn't have to do that. He could have sided with imposing a warrant requirement, but he didn't. When you hear him say that, well, he's just got tight margins, what do you make of that claim?
Well, I think that the speaker is doing what he believes he wants to do, fund Ukraine. He decided that that was more important than dealing with the border. He decided it was more important to pass FISA without the warrant protections than to pass it with the warrant protections. As you noted, he cast the tie-breaking vote effectively as the speaker, which speakers are not traditionally prone to do. Meaning he was the one that helped get it to the number that got it passed, blocked from being passed to protect Americans. But importantly, this whole idea is like, quote, we have a razor-thin majority. I heard former President Trump making that point yesterday. Let me ask you a question. What is the majority in the Senate? Right? Chuck Schumer has a Senate that is, I believe, 52-48. And by the way, it takes 60 to get anything done in the Senate, so it requires Republicans. Yet somehow the fact that we have a, quote, razor-thin majority in the House, which, by the way, by unfortunately some of my New York colleagues kicking out George Santos. And so now because we have, quote, only a two-seat majority in the House, we can't get stuff done. But the Senate seems to get everything they want to get done. Chuck Schumer was gleeful on the floor of the Senate this week that they got everything they
Signal disrupted a little bit.
Go to Hamas.
Yeah.
They got everything they wanted.
Yeah, so just you broke up just a little bit there, but as you pointed out, you said Chuck Schumer was gleeful about all the things they got, and I heard you also say that not only is Israel getting money, but Hamas is getting money, and that makes no sense whatsoever. Why are we funding both sides of a war yet again?
It makes no sense, and everybody should have to understand that the money is, in fact,
okay,
will in fact end up in the hands of Hamas.
Yeah, no, that's right, and it's deeply frustrating. I just saw a few moments ago a tweet from one of your colleagues, Thomas Massie. He was on the floor of the House on Saturday and filmed a short video of Democrats waving the Ukrainian flag and chanting "Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine" as they passed a $95 billion spending package that included no protections for our collapsing country. Now, he says he just reported that the House Sergeant at Arms is now attempting to fine him, I believe, $500 unless he takes that post down because he violated House rules by filming a video on the floor. And yet he points out that every single person who's waving a foreign flag on the floor of the House is in violation. Doesn't the House Sergeant at Arms work for Mike Johnson? Why aren't the people waving Ukrainian flags being fined?
Yeah, I do believe that the speaker should tell the Sergeant at Arms to back off. Look, I do believe in maintaining a certain level of decorum, and if you're going to enforce it one way, you kind of have to force it across the board.
Yeah.
If they were going to be very clear about this with Ukraine, then okay, fine. Say you can't have a video filmed on the floor of the House. That is technically one of our rules.
Sure.
But Massie, myself, we were being charged fines, or at least they tried to fine us, if we didn't wear a mask on the floor 3 years ago. Now we're sitting down there on the floor, and all of this breaks out with the flags. And we were all enraged that this would happen on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. And I went over to the speaker and I said, Mike, you get this to end. And I mean, like right now, if you go look back at the tape, you'll see me run to the microphone. And I told the Democrats, I can't kill this bill, but I can damn well force about 3 or 4 more votes. And I'm going to make you miss all of your precious flights for your fundraisers if you don't get those Ukraine flags and shove them back in your pocket. We were able to try to kill that on the floor, but the damage had already been done. on the floor of the U.S. House, Ukraine flags are being waved around while hardworking Americans are left holding the bag, unable to afford their groceries and their livelihoods and be able to go to work and drive to work and pay for their kids. And our borders are wide open and Americans are dying. And we send $100 billion overseas unpaid for, including money for Hamas. So Thomas Massie is right. I hope he pushes back on the Sergeant at Arms. And I hope the Speaker will say, look, we're not going to find Thomas Massie, but we're going to enforce decorum going forward. There'll be no more flags. And then maybe we can listen about whether we're concerned about a recording of this, horrific act by members of Congress.
Now, we've got a lot of words of judgment for Congress, but obviously there are people there like yourself who are still trying to fight the good fight in the face of overwhelming odds. I have to ask you, Congressman, why is Congress the way it is? My reaction this weekend, I'll be completely honest with you, I said it Monday when I got on the air, I just felt totally disheartened by what I saw. They're spending money on other countries, not on their own. They're abandoning us. They're waving foreign flags on the floor. We have hundreds of thousands of people dying to fentanyl and the cartels. The borders are collapsing. I don't need to list all the horribles. We all know them. But I see all of that, and I think this is just disgraceful, and they don't care about us. They don't give a damn about us. That's the message that I got this weekend. Why? How did it get this way?
Well, I'll put it this way. First of all, we have the worst form of government except for all the others, right, as they say. And you watch the sausage get made, and you kind of throw your hands up, and you get frustrated. I do. I mean, I was down there. I mean, I'm devoting my life. I'm away from my family. I'm missing stuff with my kids. I've got a family member, my grandma, who's sick right now. I'm trying to get back to see her. I mean, it is what it is, but I signed up for this to serve my country, and I go there and I fight because I want to change things. So this is happening on my watch, right? I go down in the history books as a member of the Congress that has been racking up debt at extraordinary numbers that did exactly what you saw happen on the floor of the House. But I'll just tell you this. The reason it happens is that members of Congress ultimately are more beholden to the donor class and the financial interest than the 750,000 people that they represent. And they don't listen to the people at home, and they don't honor what they said they would do when they get to D.C. because they want to, be liked by their colleagues. And I got to be honest with you. I care more about being liked at home than I do about being liked, in the well of the House.
Yeah.
And I think too many of my colleagues view it the other way. They want to fit in the club. They don't want to offend. And look, I have a lot of great friends in Congress that I've made over the last 4 or 5 years. But my duty is to the Constitution and to my constituents. And more of my colleagues need to understand that and fundamentally recognize, are you willing to put it on the line? And too many Republicans,
yes,
half of Republicans, I would tell you, they're too afraid to fight, and they're frankly complicit in a lot of the things that they'll complain about Democrats. So here's the good news. We're moving in the right direction.
Right.
We've got more numbers there. 55 members voted against the rule. A majority of Republicans voted against Ukraine. Elise Stefanik voted against Ukraine. It was a majority. People need to remember that. We just need a bigger and stronger conservative majority.
Yeah, the majority of the Republicans voted against this. That's true. And then finally, the Speaker of the House, he said that he had a change of hearts on both the warrantless surveillance of Americans and on prioritizing the border over Ukraine funding because of classified briefings that he received. He goes into that skiff, he gets the classified briefing, he comes out and he realizes he's got to side against the American people. What is that? How does the intel community hold so much sway over Speaker Johnson based on his own admission?
Well, he can speak for himself, but I'll tell you this is a typical way that things happen in Washington. Notice that everything that we've done this year that's been not good has been done in the name of defense. We violated the caps that we set to freeze spending and check spending because supposedly it would hurt defense. We didn't pass warrant protections because it supposedly would hurt intelligence, i.e. defense. We just voted for $100 billion unpaid for with no border security, ironically, in the name of, quote, defense. This is always the excuse. They go down into the skiff. That is the place where you receive intelligence briefings. And then they come out and they say, well, I can't tell you, but just trust me. If we don't do this thing, bad stuff will happen. And then they govern by fear. And that gives you the excuse to take the easy way out, which is to spend money we don't have in the name of doing something that sounds good to a lot of people while not making the hard decisions to constrain spending, focus on America first, and then, have a strong military for peace through strength. but not endless wars in which we rack up $8.5 trillion of debt over the last 25 years with ghost budgeting while we don't pay for war. And last point I'll make, when all of these people in the donor class and the rich folks in the Wall Street Journal editorial board, when they want to agree to for a bill that would increase the top marginal rate to 50% to pay for these wars, then come knock on my door arguing for the damn wars.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, George Orwell had a room in 1984 called Room 101. That's where people went in, they got their minds changed because they were beaten into submission. You should hang the words Room 101 right over the skiff, wherever that is, inside the Congress.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens. Their minds change. Chip Roy, Congressman, great to talk to you as always, sir. Thank you very much. We've got Rick calling in from Reston, line 1. Rick, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. Brevity is the soul of wit. I just wanted to tag on to what you and the representative were just talking about.
Yeah.
When you get the security state, the IC, the Bureau, DOD, talking about a thing, whether it's 702 without a warrant or you'll fund Ukraine or bad things are going to happen, they're never engaged in the weighing of competing interests, which is what Congress is supposed to do. They have a job. They're focused on doing that job. Sort of like NIH and those people back during COVID where, hey, we had the no new sickness, not one more case policy. But they weren't weighing any other competing interests, and none of these folks are weighing competing interests.
Yes,
like
and I get the impression that members of Congress probably fall in one of two camps. They either sit there like ignorant children, impressionable children who are just like, oh, okay, and they just do whatever they're told by the security state. Or, on the other hand, maybe they've got some secrets that they would not like in public, and they think to themselves, boy, I really shouldn't cross these guys. I should just do whatever they ask of me.
That's a horrible thought, and I hope you're wrong, but you might be right.
I wonder. I do wonder. Remember, it was Chuck Schumer who went on national television and said the intel community has, 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you, or 7 ways, whatever the phrase is. He was bragging about it on Rachel Maddow's show. He thought it was a safe place. He's like, there's nobody watching. I can say it here. Thanks, Rick. Yeah, pretty wild. Coming up, more of your calls, the news of the day, and have you seen what's happening on these college campuses across the country? The pro-Hamas crowd has taken over to the point that one major university has announced no more classes for the rest of the year. There's just too much Nazism running amok. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We've got Jonathan Bernitsky coming up. He just wrote a column, Jewish Democrats Need to Wake Up. We'll talk to him about that at 5:30. On the phones right now, William is calling in from Connecticut, line 3. William, good afternoon. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Vince. Great show. Love listening to you.
Thank you.
As we had, if you want to know what's going on today, catch up in the afternoon with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
But in Orwell's 1984, Room 101 is where the individual is confronted with their worst possible fear. So the question is, what is Mike Johnson's worst fear?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is his fear, and do they wield that against the people that they bring into the skiff as they get them to work against the interests of their voters, William?
Yeah, I go back to that Tucker comment that says he's spoken to, leaders on the Hill that say, if they don't pull the line, all of a sudden photos end up on their hard drives, whether that's true or not, but can't put anything past the intel community these days.
Yeah. That's for sure. And apparently you have members of Congress very freaked out by the intel community, scared to death of them. And given their nefarious activity over all these past few years especially, you have every reason to be. Thank you, William. I appreciate the phone call. Thank you. A smart point. Yeah, Room 101, 1984. Let's see here. Richard is calling in from Manassas now. Richard, you are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. Love your show. Glad there's traffic or I can listen to most of it.
It's one of the upsides to traffic. It's funny you said I truly mean this. In the past, I've definitely listened to radio shows and thought to myself, if I'm going to be stuck in traffic, at least I can listen to this. It'll make it go a little bit easier.
Exactly. So I had this thought while we're just discussing the Trump NDA, and if I recall, that NDA with Stormy Daniels was violated during the Trump presidency by Stormy Daniels that resulted in her paying Trump's legal fees is part of a judgment against her for violating the suddenly illegal NDA hush money thing that other courts have found legally binding. And I wonder if that is not a good defense or a tool in the defense's toolbox to break out and go, hey, this other court over here said it's perfectly legal. As a matter of fact, Stormy Daniels herself had a judgment against her because she broke it.
Yeah, so she did have a judgment against her, and this is, I'm going to cite from the Associated Press coverage at the time. This is back in 2023, April of last year, just about a year ago. Stormy Daniels must pay nearly $122,000 of Donald Trump's legal fees that were racked up in connection with the porn actor's failed defamation lawsuit. An appeals court ruled Tuesday. The decision in California came about the same time that Trump became the only ex-president to be charged with a crime, yada, yada, yada. But the idea here is the reason she had to pay him is because she pursued a failed defamation suit against him. It got thrown out, and I guess she had to pay the legal fees that he incurred as a result of the suit. So, I mean, and I remember at the time thinking, well, this is classic Trump. Like Trump, like now he's got the porn star lady is paying him $122,000. Isn't that an amazing way for this saga to go? So, yeah, it is true. So, she's had to cough up money in the past now, at least in the past year, to Trump because of failed claims that she's made about him.
Which was in violation of the NDA she signed with Trump in the first place.
One would assume, yeah.
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 So it's just very weird. I was listening to Kudlow during a break, and he said, NDAs are not illegal. Hush money is not illegal. Filing it as a legal expense may be unethical, but not illegal. So nothing that Trump has done is illegal, and he certainly didn't violate at the state level federal election law. So he's probably going to get convicted but overturned on appeal.
That's what I keep hearing, and that's what seems like the most likely course here. But we'll see. Maybe Bragg and Biden's Justice Department can screw this up enough that they fail on the first step, which would be great. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, right. I appreciate the phone call. On Richard's point here about the legality of all of this and was anything illegal, Trump's team has been arguing now over the course of the past 2 days, literally nothing involved here is illegal. Nothing. That's the case they're making in the court. They're trying to convince, of course, the jury of that because it's true. And you should, I saw Byron York tweet about this over at the Washington Examiner. None of the cable commentary on this subject has included that detail. They're not even talking about the legality of any of this. They're just talking about the lurid nature of the National Enquirer and the catch and the kill and the. But nobody's even attempting to address the underlying fundamentals. Is there anything illegal going on here? No. And yet, the court is being used in an abusive way. And that brings me to a couple of points. One, Politico has a report today that on cable news, all of the anti-Trump attorneys, if not all of them, certainly most of them, have been coordinating their messages. Are you shocked to hear this? You ready for like the list of people? People like Andrew Weissman, George Conway, Bill Kristol, Norm Eisen, Lawrence Tribe, Barbara McQuaid, Joyce White Vance, Jennifer Rubin, Mary McCord, Harry Littman, Elliot Williams, Asha Rangappa, Norm Ornstein, Renato Mariotti, Shan Wu, Ryan Goodman. You know what all of those people have in common? They are all part of weekly phone calls where they discuss Donald Trump and the illegal effort to take him down. And then they all go on television, and then they claim to have these independent thoughts about what's actually going on. This is a Politico piece today that it's so funny. The way the Politico piece is written, it's written as it's like, okay, we're revealing this to you, but Republicans are going to pounce on it. We just want you to know ahead of time. Republicans will pounce on this collusion. The headline is Inside the Off-the-Record Calls Held by Anti-Trump Legal Pundits. And it starts here, written by a guy called Ankush Kardori, the senior writer for Politico magazine, a former federal prosecutor. As the January 6th committee was working on its bombshell investigation into the Capitol riot and President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the last election, committee staffers took some time out of their seemingly 24-hour jobs one day in 2022 to brief a group of lawyers and legal pundits on a Zoom call. I hope Jeffrey Toobin wasn't on that call. You got to be careful. You never know what you might see. The people on the call weren't affiliated with the investigation or the government. but they would have been familiar to anyone who watches cable news. They were some of the country's most well-known legal and political commentators, and they were there to get insights into the committee's work and learn about what to look for at the hearings. Now remember, just while we're on the issue, the January 6th committee was a completely rigged, contrived, and fact-free effort to take down Trump. They had information, for instance, the video of Trump calling for people to be peaceful and patriotic at the Capitol never aired at the so-called January 6 hearings put together by Nancy Pelosi. So this wasn't a fact-finding mission. It was a smear machine paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars. And now you have anti-Trump attorneys meeting with the people who were a part of this, to include, by the way, remember the television producer who came, where did he come from? ABC, I think? He comes over to the January 6th committee to make it more dramatic because Benny Thompson isn't dramatic enough. We need to add more pizzazz to this as we air it in primetime. Politico reports the group's gathering was not a one-time event. Not a one-time event, but in fact, an installment in an exclusive weekly digital salon whose existence has not been previously reported for prominent legal analysts and progressive and conservative anti-Trump lawyers and pundits. Every Friday, so this goes back to the January 6th committee. This has been going on for years, at least. They meet on Zoom to hash out the latest twists and turns in the Trump legal saga and intellectually stress test the arguments facing Trump on his journey through the American legal system. The meetings are off the record, meaning secret. They're not supposed to be known by the public. A chance for the group's members, many of whom are formally or loosely affiliated with different media outlets, to grapple with a seemingly endless array of novel legal issues before they hit the airwaves or take to print or digital outlets to weigh in with their thoughts. About a dozen or more people join any given call, though no one takes attendance. Some group members wouldn't describe themselves with any partisan or ideological lean, but most are united by their dislike of Trump. The group's host is a guy called Norman Eisen, a senior Obama administration official, longtime Trump critic, and CNN legal analyst. Let me pause for a moment and just point out, as I go through the names here, what you're not going to hear is Jonathan Turley. You're not going to hear, it's not like the case that even this piece will attempt to make is, well, they all have independent thoughts. It's like a law school classroom. They're just debating the issues and they're all coming up with their own conclusions. Really? Well, then how come you're not bringing any countervailing viewpoints in? How come you're not bringing in attorneys who say stuff like, hey, none of this is illegal. Hey, this is a total violation of our justice system. Hey, this is totally tyrannical. You can't arrest your political opponent just to try and upend the election. Is that voice a part of these calls? No, he or she is not at all. So Norm Eisen, longtime Trump critic, Obama official, CNN person, he's been convening the group since 2022. Eisen was also a key member of the team of lawyers assembled by House Democrats to handle Trump's first impeachment. Okay, so a Trump impeachment guy is leading these secret conversations between all of the left-wing legal analysts who appear on all of the cable networks, in case you're wondering why they all sound the same. The regular attendees on Eisen's call include the following: Bill Kristol, a man who has lost his mind, the longtime conservative commentator, and Lawrence Tribe, the famed liberal constitutional law professor. John Dean, who was White House counsel under Richard Nixon before pleading guilty to obstruction of justice in connection with Watergate, joins the calls, as does George Conway, a conservative lawyer and co-founder of the anti-Trump Lincoln Project. Andrew Weissman, a longtime federal prosecutor who served as one of the senior prosecutors in Robert Mueller's Trump-Russia investigation. He's the guy who led it. That's Mueller's pit bull. Is now a legal analyst for MSNBC, another regular on the calls. Jeffrey Tubin is also a pioneer in the field of cable news legal analysis. He's also a member of the crew. So Tubin is on these calls. Well, that's a risk. The rest of the group includes recognizable names from the worlds of politics, law, and media. It goes on and on here. But the names I read out to you a moment ago are all the names that are mentioned in this piece, people who are all involved in this call. And as the piece points out, they say that this is sure to be the kind of thing that conservatives and right-wingers jump all over. They're going to point at this and say, this is a conspiracy. We can see it already, they say. So have you noticed that the Republican Pounce news cycle has now reached less than a blink of an eye? It's not even, when this article was published, we hadn't known about this yet. It gets published. It's inside the article. Republicans will pounce on this. It hadn't even happened yet. They can predict the future. So that's what's going on here. Vince is calling in from Fredericksburg now, line 4. Vince, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things that you I think in Alvin Bragg's secret last-minute charge that he had about this conspiracy, and the fact that all these different lawyers are working together. It seems like they're kind of working as a conspiracy to affect the outcome of an election.
Yes. You may even say, as Fannie Willis claims down in Georgia, that it's a RICO violation. It's an organized criminal conspiracy to destroy Donald Trump and interfere in the election.
Sounds like it to me.
It sure seems like it. I mean, how many jurisdictions need to be directly connected to the White House before we start saying, wait a second, this kind of seems like one big conspiracy? It doesn't seem like any underlying violations of the law. They're violating the Democrat path to power. That's the violation here, Vince.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I appreciate the call. It's so now you got all these guys all together, all these left-wing commentators who are saying, who are coordinating all their messages, stress testing their message. What do you mean stress test? Again, I don't see Joe DeGeneva on these phone calls. His name is not listed here. Like, can you imagine Joe on these calls? That'd be the best. If they welcome Joe to the calls, then I'm gonna stand up for this phone call next week. As soon as if I hear that Joe DeGeneva joined this Friday's call, I'll say, you know what, this is a real exchange of ideas that's going on here. That's not what's happening. They're not inviting Joe at all. Occasionally, though, you are getting pieces right now who are indicating that this is all crazy, what's happening to Trump. In the New York Times today, there's a piece by a Boston University law professor by the name of Jed Sugarman. Love that name. Sugarman. It might be Sugarman, but I'll say Sugarman. I think that's funnier. So Mr. Sugarman writes this today. He says, about a year ago when Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, indicted former President Donald Trump, I was critical of the case, and I called it an embarrassment, he said. I thought an array of legal problems would and should lead to long delays in federal courts. After listening to Monday's opening statement by prosecutors, I still think the Manhattan DA has made a historic mistake. Their vague allegation about a, quote, criminal scheme to corrupt the 2016 presidential election has me more concerned than ever about their unprecedented use of state law and their persistent avoidance of specifying an election crime or a valid theory of fraud. To recap, he writes, Mr. Trump is accused in this case of falsifying business records. Those are misdemeanor charges. To elevate it to a criminal case, Mr. Bragg and his team have pointed to potential violations of federal election law and state tax fraud. They also cite state election law, but state statutory definitions of public office seem to limit those statutes to state and local races. Both the misdemeanor and the felony charges require that the defendant made the false record with, quote, intent to defraud. A year ago, I wondered how entirely internal business records, the daily ledger, the pay stubs, invoices, could even be the basis of any fraud if they're not even shared with anyone outside of the business. That's a good point. How can you say that documents that are literally just meant for internal bookkeeping would be a part of a fraud if they're just for in-house use? You're not defrauding anyone. You're just writing things down on paper inside your business. He said, I suggested that the real fraud was Mr. Trump's filing an allegedly false report to the Federal Elections Commission, and only federal prosecutors had jurisdiction over that filing. Again, that didn't even happen anyway, so it's not a crime. Not a crime. But he goes on to say that there are significant legal problems here. Significant. Instead of a theory of defrauding state regulators, Mr. Bragg has adopted a weak theory of so-called election interference. And Justice Juan Merchan has described the case, in his summary of it during jury selection, as an allegation of falsifying business records, quote, to conceal an agreement with others to unlawfully influence the 2016 election. As a reality check, here's the reality check. It is legal for a candidate to pay for a non-disclosure agreement. Hush money is unseemly, but it is legal. The election law scholar Richard Hassan rightly observed, quote, calling it election interference actually cheapens the term and it undermines the deadly serious charges in the real election interference cases. Like the one that should be launched against Biden, obviously. In Monday's opening argument, the prosecutor, Matthew Colangelo, who came from the Biden Justice Department, still evaded specifics about what was illegal about influencing an election. And then he claimed, quote, it was election fraud, pure and simple. None of the relevant state or federal statutes refer to filing violations as fraud. Calling it election fraud is a legal and strategic mistake, exaggerating the case and setting up the jury with high expectations that the prosecutors cannot meet. Okay, I'll pause here. This is a New York Times column today from a Boston University law professor going, this is insane. Why are they doing this? Election interference, just in case you're wondering. If you're looking for some, we found it. Coming up, more of your calls. Can't wait to get to those. And Jonathan Brunitsky will be with us telling Jewish Democrats it's time for them to wake up. That's ahead.